Hello, welcome to Kevin's Corner. I'm Kevin Horner from Galligan and Manning. Thank you for joining me today. I am going to talk about something that is probably not on people's radars yet, but should be, and that is prenups. I'm actually also going to talk about postnups, but I figure we'd start with the prenups. So why are we going to talk about this now? One, we've had a lot of people who've been interested in these recently, and I find there's a lot of misinformation about what prenups are and what they can accomplish. And especially since, depending on where you are as a viewer, you might be coming up on wedding season in a few months. A lot of times what I have found, which is very difficult to accommodate, is people come in, the couple, 2 weeks before the wedding date and say, all right, we need a prenup. And I know why they do that. They assume it is a form that you can print off, you change the names and sign, and that is very much not how prenups work. This is not a legal Zoom type of a document. So what I wanted to talk about is a little bit what they are, and then why you use them beyond what is probably the more obvious, because it's not just prenups, it also could be, depending on all the dynamics of it, a postnup. Same idea, separating things in case of divorce or whatever afterwards. So now I know I say this all the time, this is a very good example of this, that this area of law is extraordinarily state specific. You know, like I'm doing this from Texas where we have community property, so you really are doing property divisions with this or keeping property of a certain character. Whereas in other states, it's common law, like Pennsylvania and New York, where I'm admitted, and you still have a similar concept there, but it's not actually changing ownership per se. So, point being, I'm going to touch the basics of all of this. The exact way it applies for you depends on where you are. All right, just see that law for more detail. So let's start with what they are. Most people are familiar with the concept of the prenup as you're keeping what you bring to the marriage separate, so that if you get divorced, that asset is not part of the divorce. And that is absolutely what a prenup can do for you. That is definitely one part of it. Why do you do it in those circumstances? It could be because both people in the marriage, or maybe only one, brings a lot of wealth. They get married later in life, so they've accumulated more, and there's a lot more they want to keep separate. The way demographics are now, it could be a second marriage, and so you have other beneficiaries that you'd have in mind instead of your spouse, such as kids from a prior relationship, or just maybe quote unquote your family as opposed to the other spouse's family. And so it's a way of keeping, either in divorce or in ownership in community property states, what is yours to stay yours. Now, how you do it depends on what you own, which you probably could guess, but a lot of times it's you never put both names on the bank account. You have the agreement first. You never put both names on the bank account. And you essentially can keep them as just kind of like it is if you're together and sharing expenses before you get married, and you kind of maintain that kind of a relationship. Now, you can do with a lot more specificity of that, but that's kind of a general way it can apply. Another really common reason why people want to do these is because again, the statistics being what they are and the divorce rate being what that is, they have seen a parent go through a bad divorce, they have already gone through a bad divorce themselves, a sibling, the spouse has gone through a bad divorce, and so they're being asked to do this, or essentially anyone in their close sphere has gone through a difficult circumstance and they're trying to find a way to make it easier. This is especially true, I find, when there's family businesses, things where who would be in charge of that business, hypothetically the spouse. If you and a sibling own a business together, maybe it came from your parents, and the two of you are 50-50 owners, and you don't have a prenup addressing what happens either in the estate plan or in a divorce, do you really want your sibling to be running this business with your spouse down the road? Maybe, maybe not. So you do those kinds of things to make sure that the business is protected. Those are all very good reasons of why you do them. The one other one I do want to mention, because this does come up, especially in community property states, and it's the postnup aspect of it. Not just you meant to do a prenup and you never got around to it, but people do them in Medicaid planning too. So say, for example, if you're going to have one spouse go into a nursing home and use Medicaid, now the way it generally works with Medicaid is if you're married, the government's going to look at both assets regardless. But what it does mean is when the spouse who's in the nursing home would pass away, what they own is what goes to their estate. That's what is available to pay back the government. If you've done a postnup so that you break down ownership between the two spouses, you can have it, in theory, if everything is set up properly, you can have it so the well spouse essentially owns everything. and there's not much to go through the estate, if anything, and the estate of it first. So it's a good component or a good complement to a good Medicaid plan, especially before you go on those kind of benefits. That's another reason why. And then the final thing I want to talk about is actually going back to the what concept. I mentioned about how wedding season is coming, which could be summer depending where you are, but here we are in March. It takes a lot more time to do these than people think, because both parties, so that there's an open and everyone knows what they're agreeing to, that's what makes these valid, is you kind of disclose your income, your assets, and your liabilities. You disclose what it is that you're asking the other person to waive an interest in. And that takes time. You don't come in having a full set of asset and liability schedules. That's something you do with your attorney. So that's why, when people come in and they say, okay, we're getting married in 2 weeks, we need the form for that. It does not exist, because you need all of that very specific information that takes a lot of time to accumulate. So what does this mean? If you're thinking you're going to get married, or you know someone who's going to get married, and you're thinking a prenup makes sense, either because you want to keep things separate in a divorce, you want to protect that family business, it's a second marriage, you want your family to feel more comfortable about this, whatever, you want to start well in advance. Okay, we have a client now who's starting probably 5 minutes, realistically speaking, in advance of the wedding. That's perfect, because you can set it up, you can take care of it, you can have it signed long before the actual wedding, and then everything else that you want to focus on, the wedding and your spouse, you have plenty of time and energy to do so. So hopefully those are a couple of good answers to questions of the what and the why about prenups and postnups. If you have any questions, we do these fairly frequently, so by all means call us, or you can contact our office for a consultation on this. Our website also should have more information on this, galliganmanning.com. So I want to say thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you again next Thursday for Kevin's Corner.